You're listening to the ADHD Heroes Podcast, a podcast where we speak with the heroes of the ADHD community, namely educators, mental health professionals, and of course, those with ADHD themselves, to gain insights, tools, and most importantly, inspiration towards succeeding and thriving with ADHD. I'm your host, Rabbi Shmuel Reich, a high school rebbi and an ADHD coach in private practice. Welcome to the show. Hi there. On this week's episode, I spoke with Rabbi Yehuda Grunhut, a mashgiach in Rabbi Feivelson's Yeshiva in Israel. Roughly, a mashgiach refers to a rebbi whose role involves specific attention to students' personal growth in addition to their studies and learning. Rabbi Grunhut is also an ADHD coach in private practice. He shared his powerful story of first getting his diagnosis at age 39, just a couple years ago, and the unique experience of having inattentive ADHD. This is the first episode in which we focused on inattentive type ADHD, so it'll be a nice novelty. I'm glad we're touching on it. In case you're wondering about this, ADHD without visible hyperactivity used to be called ADD, missing the H for hyperactivity, but now it's called ADHD Inattentive Type. So those are the same thing. We also discussed motivation, the value and challenges of note-taking with ADHD, and a lot more. At one point in the story, he mentions someone using someone else's medication. So just a friendly reminder, as Rabbi Shmuel Blackman taught us a way back, this is very much not recommended, to say the least. Also, we had a couple of silly moments toward the end, a little uncharacteristic, but I hope you enjoy them. And a friendly reminder, as always, to listen on double speed. This is a little bit of a long one, so you'll need it. Enjoy. Rabbi Yehuda Grunhut, welcome to the ADHD Heroes Podcast. I'm excited for our conversation today.
Wow, thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor to be here. And it was actually to hear the past podcasts, and they were actually very inspirational.
Oh, thank you.
And I hear all of them, and I didn't hear all of them, but I did hear most of them, and they were great. So I hope I can fill the shoes of the ones that you put out already.
Okay, I'm confident you will be. Okay. And looking forward. So before we dive in, just a little bit about yourself and your background, just like a general outline.
General outline. Okay, I grew up in Kew Gardens, Queens, New York. Elementary school, went to Ar Yisrael. We moved to Lakewood when I was in 8th grade. I actually stayed behind. I lived by my grandparents for 8th grade. So my parents moved to Lakewood, right then when I was in 13. They're still there. I went to high school to Masifta Long Beach for 9th and 10th grade. Yeshiva for Rockaway for 10th and for 11th and 12th. And then I was in Lev Aryeh in Eretz Yisrael for almost 4 years, off to Philadelphia. Then got married, moved back to Eretz Yisrael, where it's been Yagil, Mir, and now I've been in a place called Feivelson. The official name is Yeshiva Derech HaChaim. I've been there for 15 years. And the past couple of years, I've evolved into becoming the mashgiach of the yeshiva.
Awesome. Okay, great. So usually I like to start with bringing things back to the beginning, but there's like a big spoiler alert we have to mention here, which is, when did your ADHD diagnosis take place?
Oh, you're assuming that I'm ADHD, huh? When did it? I'm a late diagnosed ADHDer. I was diagnosed last year. Already a mashgiach and I've been in yeshiva for so many years. I was at 39 last year. I guess we'll get into it later exactly how that happened, but I did get a diagnosis of quite inattentive ADHD, and it was an extremely, I guess you could say, life-changing event. It was a very liberating, extremely empowering moment when I found out, that it was ADHD, and it answered tons of questions. And so that's
right. Wow.
That's
so
our spoiler alert. Yeah.
Well, yeah. So we now know the end of the story.
That was ADHD, but okay.
Yeah. So with that in mind, now let's take a look back. retroactively going through your little bit of your schooling experiences. I guess we'll start with elementary school, unless you have memories from earlier than that you'd like to share.
I don't know if there's any, I guess, in regard to ADHD, early memories. The first I remember ADHD coming in was actually probably in about fourth grade. Until then, I was great. Socially, I think I was fine. I was a bit of a space cadet, quite a bit of a space cadet. I actually remember random memory, but I remember talking to myself a lot as a kid. And at some point that became very embarrassing. So I started talking to myself in my head, where I would just go off into a corner and space out and kind of talk to myself and talk to myself. And I actually just saw a thing from Barkley about that, where that's pretty common, especially for inattentives, to, as kids, talk to themselves and then kind of take it internal. And they tend to start talking to themselves, but in their head, but kind of a cognitive talking to themselves.
Okay, as a phenomenon, I mean, getting lost in thoughts and ruminating is very common.
Oh, the ruminating is very common, but here there's more. It's just like, I'll go off in long conversations with myself, but kind of in my head. And I just remember doing it as a kid. I used to walk around just I tell myself stories and talk and just literally have a conversation with myself. And then I remember I think it was in first grade, where people would look at me funny, and I realized I better start doing this quietly. So it was either in the bathroom and then or in the corner, just talking to myself in my head. I think I actually remember once talking to myself in the bathroom. I used to say stories to myself, and then I realized that my father and my brothers were sitting outside the door of the bathroom listening, and that's when I stopped even using the bathroom to talk to myself. So I went totally internal. So if you're out there and you talk to yourself, you're as not normal as I am. Yeah, good company.
Excellent company.
Yeah, best company possible. If you want to come and meet me and talk to ourselves, you can do that. I do that all the time. Yeah.
Talk to yourselves together.
You're talking to me.
Yeah,
I'm good at that. I'm very good at doing it with chavrusas. They do it with me more than I do with them. I'll be learning with someone, and he finds that he's talking to himself the whole time.
See what you did there.
So as far as early memories, so fourth grade, the Shnayas, that's when the Rebbe had to start going into explanations. Until then, it was rote. The Chumash was kind of by rote, and I was good at that. I was good at remembering the Taich. Stories, I was, that always captured my attention. I remember how in fourth grade, that's when the Rebbe started going off into explanations. And that's when I started getting lost. I didn't know why. I just knew that whenever the Rebbe went into an explanation, he lost me. But I was still keeping up. I did very well. I was able to, the Mishnayos part was still by rote. We would say the Mishnayos and say the translations. And so I was the material I was knowing was the explanations I was having a hard time with. I still remember getting very high marks in fourth grade. Fifth grade, when we started Gemara, that's when I started having I remember having a much harder time paying attention in class. And that got progressively harder as the years went on. So I was in Yeshiva high school, Yeshiva elementary school, where Gemara was the main subject, and which involved a lot of explanations and listening, and my mind was everywhere. Now, I was not a troublemaker. I was a good kid. I just sat there and I spaced out. I remember going to the library, taking out every day, I'd just sneak a book out, bring it to class, keep it in my desk, and went through the entire Hardy Boys section. We had a really old library. And I just sat in the back of the class, and I kind of spaced out. My Rebbeim were pretty good. We had pretty good Rebbeim. Some better, some less. They were all pretty. I never had problems with the Rebbeim. Sixth grade, actually, I this is an ADHD thing. Sixth grade, we had this project. The Rebbe gave us this project where we had to write down we had to go through like a huge Agada to Gemara. I think it was a Megillah.
The story Gemaras, I was translating.
The story Gemaras. So we had, the story Gemaras. We had to go through them and write down all the sources in the Torah, all the psukim. He had to find he gave us this whole project where there's tons of sources from the Torah, and we had to find all the sources and write them down. Now, it was a long-term project. Turns out, for ADDers, long-term projects are not our greatest things that we shine at. So, of course, I waited till the night before, and then, we got to get that project done. Okay, sure. Usually I'm pretty good at that. I'll wait till the night before, but then I go into overdrive and get it done. So I started looking up the sources, but it turns out I was really tired. And I was starting to write down, looking up each source and writing down where it was. And I said, you know what, forget it. I'll do this in the morning. I think I can get this done in the morning. I got up really early, and I went to shul. I took my papers with me, and I sat down before davening, and I started doing it. And I was going slower than I expected. And then this kid walks up to me. Yisrael Teitelbaum. Walks up to me in shul, looks over my shoulder, and he says, "Oh, you're doing it now? You didn't finish it yet?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm trying to get it done." He's like, "Wait, wait a second, you're doing it wrong." I said, "What do you mean?" He's like, "You're supposed to write down the whole sentence, the whole pasuk." I'm like, "What?" I'm not supposed to just find it and write down where it was. And like this back then, before they had these fancy Gemaras which told you exactly where the pasuk was. You had to actually find the pasuk first. I thought he just wanted us to find the pasuk and write down, it's chapter or parak, 23, pasuk, whatever. And I was sitting there doing that, finding it, and I was still having a hard time finding all the, you had to go through the whole chapter to find the right one. And I was just like, you kidding me? I got to write them all down, the whole pasuk? And he said, yeah, that's not what he told us to do. It's like, I'm telling you it is. I was like, you know what? Forget it. You know how if I'm the frustration, I was just like, forget it. I'm giving in whatever I got. And I remember I came in that day and I handed in my unfinished project, which I didn't even do because all I did was write down the what we call it, Marmakolos, the where the pasuk was. I didn't write where the whole thing out. The rebbi lost it at me. He was so,
oh no!
What do you mean? He's like, how come everyone in the class knew that they had to do it like that, and you did it? And I'm like, I didn't know. And then it happened all if I didn't finish it either. So,
right.
Trouble. I remember he told me I can't come back until my parents come with me, and they came back and they had a whole meeting with him. I don't know. They let me back into class, so it all worked out in the end. But I still remember that frustration of him saying, everyone else figured it out. And I just looked at him, but I didn't know.
Right.
And I also didn't know, how was I supposed to get it done before the last second? Little did I know is, that is a challenge and it's something we have to work around. But again, it's not an excuse, but for a sixth grader, it was just, you tell me I have to get something done in 2 months and it's a big project. It just wasn't going to happen until 0 hour.
Right.
But I would say that's a big piece right there of not getting it a lot of times.
Why not getting the instructions in class?
You're not getting the instructions. They're not getting, the social cues or, somehow figuring I'm missing something. I think that's been a piece that's been a struggle for me throughout the years. You come to terms with it, but it's there. There is a piece of, you feel like you're missing something. So then, I moved up 7th grade, 8th grade. I just did not do well. I wasn't the bottom, but I was not paying attention. I didn't know why, but I knew it was hard for me. Then high school was.
But how did you react when in 7th, 8th grade? Meaning, if you're going from a strong student through 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade, things are starting to taper off, and 7th, 8th they go pretty far south. How did you react? How did your parents react? How did the school react? How are they processing it?
I don't remember how the school acted. I think my parents were supportive. They tried. They got me. They did get me. 7th grade was a little rough. We were moving. I remember in 8th grade, I got a tutor. That's when I wasn't home also, so my parents didn't do that, and they got me a tutor. 7th grade, we talked about it. I don't remember having a tutor. I used to learn with my father, and I remember trying to explain myself why I didn't know what was going on, but I didn't know how to explain why I wasn't paying attention. But I
Right.
was trying.
Right.
And that was a frustrating part, that I was trying. And I wasn't really misbehaving. I wasn't like on the top of the list of, kids to school complaining about. And I would hear a lot from my father, but you could do it. You aced, you got, you learned the whole Zvachim Mishnayos, you knew it by heart. I didn't know it by heart, but I did get 100 on that test. But Mishnayos Balpeh, you had to learn Mishnayos by heart. I was the guy who did, what was the minimum? Like 4 Mishnayos?
I did not do this.
Mishnayos.
Right.
Whatever it was. I was not pushing myself too far. But I did push myself to know it, and I did get a good mark on the test. And he'd be like, whenever you put your mind to it, if you want to, you can do it. And I knew it was true. So, I never was able to figure out why. And this was, I guess, a theme that went on and on. And when you want to do it, you get it done.
Yeah, that's a common speech for a kid with ADHD to be hearing, as you know.
Exactly. Yeah. And then my report cards reflected the ADHD. So much potential. If only you would put in a little more effort.
There it is.
Yeah, exactly.
If you could walk if you could walk back in time and tell yourself, your parents, the adults, what's going on now that you have vocabulary for it, what would you want to tell them?
What I want to tell them, that I do want to, but I'm not sure how to get that motivation. And if I was able to express that, I would like to figure out how to make this work. And I mean, I think they knew that. I think, I was a kid who I always wanted to do well. And I think I gave that over pretty well. I don't think anyone ever accused me as someone who didn't want. Maybe they thought I was unmotivated. Maybe I was a little bit lazy. I definitely thought I was lazy. But I also wanted. I definitely wanted.
So you feel like a big piece, sir?
Yeah, if only I'd known all the things that I know now about ADHD, I think I would be a lot more compassionate, and then I would have loved to have found better strategies to work with how I learn.
Right. I'm hearing two sides. Meaning, number one, do you want to create a framework where you're feeling the motivation? Meaning, the motivation is there, but you're accessing it.
So I would say there was a want. There was sometimes there was a lack of motivation to actually do the work, but I wanted to do it.
You wanted it, but you couldn't access turning that that inner motivation into action.
Exactly. So there's, getting that inner interest would have been it was important to me, but I didn't have the interest in actually doing the work.
Right. Sort of the 4-second rule. If it's not here, if it's not here, the motivation, you don't feel the motivation right here. The word's not right here. The something's not right here.
If there's something driving me right now, right. If I'm sitting in a class and the Rebbe is teaching, I don't really understand what he's saying, I'm not going to find the motivation to pay attention.
Right. So you wanted that, or maybe a setup that spoke to your brain better in some other way,
and learning to work with my strengths. Now, yeah. So I mean, there was definitely no talk of ADHD when I was a kid. I didn't know about it, at least.
Right. Yeah.
I never heard those words.
So we discussed in the pregame. We grew up at the same time, so yeah, they didn't seem to know much when I was a kid either.
Yeah,
at the same time. Yeah, so
I mean, the hyperactive kids. Maybe I don't remember anyone on Ritalin in my class. I don't remember hearing that ever.
Yeah, I don't recall them diagnosing people, but
that kid's crazy. Yeah, that we had, but
yeah, they had other diagnoses that weren't such nice names. They weren't very helpful.
Yeah, I remember that kid who. Yeah, those kids who somehow were always eating worms and
pulling legs off daddy long legs, burning stuff.
Yeah, exactly. The frogs in camp and the salamanders. But
there you go. Yeah. Did the move interact with ADHD at all, or not really relevant?
I don't think that was really relevant. It was an interesting year. It was definitely, I gained a lot of independence. I used to go back and forth myself through Manhattan. If no one would do this anymore, for an 8th grader, I would take the subway to Manhattan, walk 4 blocks to Port Authority, and take the bus and take the bus to Lakewood, or take the Borough Park bus and then the F train through Manhattan, get off, walk around. No one knew.
Right.
Like walk to school. I don't think 13-year-olds are allowed to do that anymore.
I was gonna say not exactly helicopter parenting.
My parents were great. They were
Sounds like
really
it,
amazing, and they really gave me a lot of support. I actually learned I told you this in 8th grade. I learned in Shire Torah. They hired a bucker to learn with me every night.
Right.
And they definitely tried to support me, but there were pieces that turns out we were missing that definitely could have helped, but we didn't know about.
Right.
There's no blame and there's no bitterness, but I did have my struggles, and it was not easy. I definitely.
Right. I feel like people when we were growing up, they just didn't know.
Right, and what they saw, look, he saw that whenever I was interested, boom, I was top. I'd start off the school year doing amazing, and when anytime we came to some contest, or if it was a topic that I was interested in, I was all over it, and I did it better than anyone else. But then, when it didn't interest me, or it was taking too long, forget it. I just lost interest, and I could not figure out how to pay attention, no matter how important it was. I remember the rebbi, like in 7th grade, we had this rebbi who was, if you lost the place, you had to stand on a tile with your feet together, holding the Gemara in your hand. And that was, he was a great rebbi, very energetic, but he was, that was his way. And I was always standing there, holding that Gemara, standing on the tile. And like, I wanted to follow the plates. I didn't know how to not. I had to not space out. As socially, I do remember being a very big space cadet, especially during recess. I would sit there in the outfield, spacing out about how they're telling me not to space out. What does it mean to space out? And how do you not space? What is spacing out? And then the ball would hit me in the head, and everyone was screaming, "Why are you spacing out again?" I was the best backup right fielder ever. That's where they put me. Once in a while,
someone's got to do it.
Yeah. So then they're able to just go get I was behind the home run liner, so they didn't really care. And then sometimes backup pitcher, but not backup pitcher, a catcher. Sometimes I got backup catcher, but you had to space in a little more, because if the guy in front of you ducked, it hit you in the face.
Right. Oh wow.
So sometimes that was rough if you were too. So I had to gauge how spaced out I was that day. So, backup right field was safer.
Right. Wow. Okay. So moving on to high school, what do things look like?
Yeah. So moving on to high school, I went to Nephew. That was a huge jump. It was tough. I was coming from Queens. The schools there were a little on a lower level scholastically than they were in Lakewood and some of the better yeshivas. And so I was coming, and I heard afterwards a lot of the kids in my class who went to the higher end yeshivas had a tough time making that jump. I went from learning extra credit. We did Taisvis, and I did not do extra credit. So I had pretty much, besides for my Frahara, I had never really learned the Taisvis. And then I went to, and for those who are not familiar with Gemara, the Taisvis is one of the commentaries on the side of the Talmud that gets a little more in depth and can be a little more complicated. And I went to not just learning the Gemara, the Rashi, and the Taisvis, but jumping in and learning it in depth, learning the Ian. And I remember the first day in class, the Rebbe's giving the shir, and he tells everyone to turn to the back to the Ran. And I'm sitting there flipping through. Everyone else seemed to do a fine job. I'm like trying to see, and I was like, the desks were set up in a way I couldn't see where everyone else was, turned to. I'm like, where's the Ran? And I'm just like going back and forth. Suddenly Rebbe sees me, and he's like, so Rabbeinu Nisim says,
"Oh, excellent."
Right. And I was like, oh, I saw that guy.
Excellent.
Turned back to him. It was a big jump. It was just like, I wasn't holding as it was, it was a big jump. Even if I wasn't ADHD and had no problem, with paying attention, it still would have been a jump. But then there was trying to pay attention to a class where you didn't know what he was talking about. It was just doubly hard. And then he told me to start taking notes. Everyone took notes. It was like that was part of the thing. He kind of spoon-fed it to us. And he wanted us to get used to taking notes during class. And I could not. he would speak 3 words. I would space out and come back and like, well, it's like, what was I supposed to write? So my notes all looked like exactly the same. It would say Gemara says blank, Rashi says 2 words, and then Taisvis blank, Ritva blank, and Rabbi Chanan Claire's a question. I got the Claire part, and then and I still remember the Rebbe calling me over once. He's like, "So what? I'm so curious. What were you thinking about when the middle of share?" And I'm like, "Do you really want to know?" He's like, "Yeah." He's like, yeah. I'm curious. What were you thinking about? I was like, so I was thinking about. I was looking out and I saw the guys playing basketball, and I was thinking about basketball versus baseball. Then I started thinking about what it would be like to be a Major League Baseball player in the dugout, and what position I would play if I was a Major League Baseball player. And it started going off, and he's like, okay. Got it. Yeah, so it was hard. I did get a little better at taking notes, but it was very hard to pay attention. I was not doing well. I remember once that there was one sugi that I was a little more into it, and I thought I knew it well, and I decided, you know what, I've been such a disappointment over the year. This one I'm gonna do well. And I went in. It was the first time that I was able to answer every question on the test. Which, by the way, they had the tests in Hebrew, which was like, Hebrew was reading in Hebrew was hard. It still is. Just the processing, and translating. It's always been a challenge. I do have to read slower, and back then it was just I was not used to it. I never had a test in Hebrew, so I remember that being a very big challenge. But the ninth grade Rebbe used to go over. He was great. He happened to have been a great Rebbe. He used to go over the test first, make sure everyone understood the question. And it was the first time that I knew the answers to every question. I filled it out. I was so pumped. He used to call us in, give each person back their test every week. And then he'd throw in a comment, some encouragement or whatever it is, or critique. And I was so excited that week to come into his office, because this is the first time I actually, did well. And I had really started. I'd really put an effort, and I walk into the office, and I see this big red mark on the top that says 62 or something.
Oh,
or
no.
60. And I was just like, no way. I knew this one. And he starts telling me, you just put a little more. I saw you learn well, but a little more. And I was like,
no.
How?
Oh, it's so hard.
I remember that thing. I was so pumped to be able to call. I wanted to call my father and just tell him that I got 100 this week, or 80 or 90, whatever it was, and I dreamed I was getting, and just I was so deflated. And then at one point during the year, they started suspecting maybe I have some focusing issues, and they sent me. I think it was towards the summer. They sent me for a evaluation. I'm pretty sure it's at the end of 9th grade. And I went to this lady in Far Rockaway. I remember my father drove me all the way from Lakewood. We went for this evaluation. And at the time, again, ADHD was not a thing, and I wasn't ADHD. I was the opposite of hyper. I could sit in one place. Besides that, I could sit and read a book for not hours, days.
Right.
And I come up for air. I wouldn't hear you. So, it was the classic, he can't focus. He could focus. And not only was I able to focus, but I was also not jumpy. I'm not a hyper kid at all. I'm perfectly fine sitting around and spacing out and living in my brain. I'm never bored. Some people say they, ADHDers are allergic to boredom. Most of them are. I'm not, because I'm never bored. I always have my head to go into.
Right.
And I'm one of the best people to hang around. So, that's great.
Right.
I'm hyper. I wasn't. So no one really suspected ADHD. But they took me for an evaluation, and I was off the charts. And I remember this woman was telling my father afterwards that he did very well. He's really bright. He's off the charts on all bunch of different things. She had asked me a whole bunch of questions about, focusing and different things. I don't think ADHD was even mentioned. She did tell him that I should probably work on getting someone to help me prepare for shir. I remember telling her that when I know the sugya going in, I do much better. And they did. They got me someone to learn with in the afternoon. I remember a fellow Rabbi David Kaufman, whose son and the becoming a Talmud of mine. He just got engaged last night, actually.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, good, great guy. And he was actually, he made a big impact on me at the time. And we learned together every afternoon and helped me just, prepare and learn and get to, know the Gemara before I walk into the shir. Now, looking back and knowing what I know, that was one of the biggest keys that I wish I had known more about. That if I know the concept walking in, that already is like riddle. It piques my interest, and my dopamine gets going. I'm activated already, and I guess I'm more of a conceptual thinker. So when I have the concept in front of me, I'm going. I'm off to the races. But if I'm trying to put the pieces together and I don't know what I'm putting together, I don't see the picture. It's very hard for me to see the picture, and I'm lost. I'm gone. So that was one good thing that came out of it. But at the time, it was a big disappointment. Like she said, nothing's wrong with me. And I was like, but something's wrong. Like but I try and I can't, and it doesn't go. And I don't know. My father was like, he drove all the way in, paid $150 for this evaluation. They told him exactly what he thought was, I'm really smart, and if I want to, I'll do it. And okay, maybe you should prepare a little better, but no kedusha. And I remember him telling me, like, I told you so. And I was so I was so frustrated because I didn't know any better. Okay, that's what they said, but now what? Like, what am I supposed to do? I don't know how to. So 10th grade also, it was tough. It was tough. I actually even started 11th grade in Long Beach, and it was that L that said, okay, so this Rabbi David Calvin, was his idea actually. So maybe we should consider somewhere else. And there was this fellow, Rabbi Ginsburg, amazing fellow who I'm still very close to. He had just become the 11th grade Rebbe in Yeshiva Rockaway. And he said, he's a good friend of mine. He just became the Rebbe. Maybe you do better under him. And because I started off 11th grade and it was just like going downhill. And so they was checked into it. To me, I was just like all over it. First of all, half of my class from Queens was in YFR.
Right.
It was like all my old friends, and it was exciting for me. It was a cooler place. They wore blue shirts and cotton pants, and they at that point in my life, I was that was cool. I was. I'm not sure if YFR ever took a kid from Long Beach again, because it turns out if you're going in that direction, you're not looking to behave as well. So,
right.
I definitely gave them a run for their money. That was at that point. I never gave up. I never gave up myself. I did always try, but I was also looking to have a good time. And I was that age. I was 15, 16, 17. So it was definitely, I got to a different point in my life, and learning was hard. It was hard, and I didn't get my seatbook from it.
So it didn't pick up there.
Every year I tried. I remember in 12th grade I came in. I was all I could make sure I could kavrusas and all set up, but I didn't stick it out. And there's another aspect, and this went on for years and years and years, which is where it started off this man. We're always pumped. And this I've seen with so many boys. You see it with not only ADDers, but with ADDers, it's just so much more extreme. Where they come in and they're pumped up and they're ready for this man, and they set themselves up and they ace it. They're off and running, and then they're totally into the Gemara. And then a week, 2 weeks go by, and suddenly they just tank. Like suddenly they just don't show up. And there's one morning they don't show up, and they fall behind a little bit, and boom, that's it. They lose all motivation, and you don't see them for a month. And you're like, hey, you were doing so good. Nah, I never do good. I'm never going to make it. I'm always a failure. Like you were talking to them a week before, and they were like, it's amazing. I finally figured it out. I figured out what was wrong with me last month, and I'm going to do it this month, and I'm doing it, and then everything's amazing. And then boom, there's the up and downs are so rough. And then, and the you have these high expectations that get tanked, and they get dashed. I guess that would be the better word. And it can take out so much. And
Anything in particular?
I'm just remembering of that pattern that I saw over so many years of starting off well, and then all of a sudden not knowing what happened, losing all motivation and not being able to pull it together. And until the next time where suddenly something will come up and I'll pick myself up and I think I got it together again, and then fall, and the falls were always just very low, like fall into deep pits a lot. And if that's you out there, it's very common, especially with ADDers. We fall into deep pits, and when we're in the pits, the only thing we can remember is all the other pits that we ever fell into. And I tell a lot of people that life is like climbing a mountain. And when you climb the mountain, it's not when you slide, you're not sliding back down. You slide into pits. And there's pits all over, and it's inevitable. You're going to fall in, and some of them are deeper than others. Some are small, some are deeper, and some of them are really dark and really hard to get out of. Whenever you climb out of that pit, you're higher up on the other end. You're higher up the mountain than you were before, because you fall in on the bottom side of the pit. You come out on the higher side. That's automatic. And you keep on climbing, you're going to fall into another pit. It's going to happen. And you just keep climbing. Get out of the pit and keep climbing. This is what life's about. But you never slide back down the mountain, because you're always gaining from the experience that you get. And even your failures are always good experiences. And when you pull out, you're higher up than you were before. So that's one thing I've learned from my ups and downs in life, is that.
So we are now a lot of years later, and you're still in yeshivas. So where did things start to pick up, and how did they start to pick up?
Yeah, so it was an ongoing journey. I went to Lev Aryeh. Lev Aryeh was quite an interesting mix of guys. Amazing place, greatest staff. The mashgiach is pretty well known, Rabbi Lopian. Amazing character. Really, really built his talmidim. And the Yeshiva Rabbi Rappaport was just each one with their own character, and they just together they had this team, and they really built up the boys. They had the Magid Shir, the highest shir over there was Rabbi Baruch Levi Feivelson, who ended up going and opening his own yeshiva eventually, where I am right now. And he came in and he really lifted up his boys to real high levels of learning. So I came in, the first year was party year. I came in, I told the rebbi that I wanted to learn, I wanted to steig, but at the end of the day, the first year, the Israel experience, had my friends, and I wanted to have a good time. I did try to learn. It was a struggle. I definitely, I'm not going to say it was a flop learning wise, but they gave me my space, and I took it. So first year, I wouldn't say was a major growing year. Definitely not. Maybe I was building some foundations, but it was an exploratory year. And running around and whatever it was. The second year, I think that's where things started turning a little bit. I got. And I remember that Yom Narayan, Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur of my second year, I would say was a very big turnaround for me, where I just got very inspired, wanted to settle down and start making something of myself, and I did. I really turned around. I gave a chabura that winter. That was I felt like I was on top of the world. I put together. I learned with a fellow from Detroit. A younger man used to come to learn with me, and I prepared this kabura. I gave her in front of the whole yeshiva. It was amazing.
Oh, wow.
I think my father actually came in for it.
Really?
Yeah, he did. He came in. I think he came in anyway. He came in for Yashir Kala. No, that was a different time. He came in. We arranged it. He wanted to come to Israel. He learned for a week. He did his own Yashir Kala. He just learned. And we made sure to make it work that I gave my kabura the week that he was coming. And I did not disappoint. It was a big turning point. I got up and I learned the sugya, and I saw I can do it. There were a lot of ups and downs. during that year, after that year, but it was the first time that I started really tasting success and learning that I can do this.
Do you know what you did right? I mean, what tools you employed for yourself?
I don't remember any specific tools. I remember getting into learning, getting excited by a sugya, and just putting myself into it, and then losing motivation and not knowing what I can do different to sustain it. So that was like the hard part, was the sustaining it. But whenever I got into it, I was into it, and so there was a big turnaround in the second year. Starked out a bit. Then it was a growing process after that. But there were some big up and down, especially third year. Fourth year, I remember being more of a down than an up. I really wanted to pull myself together. I just couldn't pull it together. I could not get my motivation. I was just down. I would say the word depressed. I'm not going to say depressed, like clinically depressed, but just extremely unmotivated. And a rebbi sending me for like tests. They sent me for blood tests to make sure everything was okay. Looking back, it was just that I wasn't motivated, and I wasn't seeing accomplishment, and I was down and hard on myself. At one point, actually, they sent me for an evaluation for ADHD. This was in third year. I went to a psychiatrist in Yerushalayim. This was the first time I heard anything about ADHD and me. And he said to me, yeah, maybe you are ADHD. There is talk about two different spectrums he started telling me there's the hyperactive, and then there's like the other side, which is it's all spectrum, and you might be on the other side. Why don't you take some Ritalin and you'll know if that's what it is. And he gave me some Ritalin, and I took it that first day, and I felt like I had just been shot into outer space and stuck into the furthest planet from Earth. I was walking around a complete zombie. And I'm like, this is not, I was like, if I was in my head beforehand, this was way further. I was just out. I was not on this planet.
Right.
And I tried it for like a few days. Some headaches, but that wasn't the worst. The worst part was just, I just wasn't present. I was gone. Right. I couldn't focus on anything. I was focused in my head, but I couldn't get out of it. And I tried calling back the psychiatrist. There was no real follow-up. I remember he gave me his whole speech. He was nervous because it was a stimulant, and, kids in Eretz Yisrael, people are running around, and he made me swear like on the Torah that I would not take it in any other fashion other than what he told me to do, and I wouldn't abuse it. And I kept my word, but I may have been tempted. I was curious after he told me to swear that. I wonder what's the deal with that. Where I sent it back. I remember it was my roommate was actually going to him, and I found out, and I said, "Here, could you take this back to him and tell them it didn't work?" And he never got back to me. Really weird, actually.
Right.
Up to think of it. But I was convinced that, okay, forget it. It's not ADHD. Ritalin didn't work, so that's not what it is. I don't know. It's just me. I'm just a failure.
Right.
And so I had a pretty rough finish the fourth year. And like, I always thought I would, I'll keep on steiging, go to the mirror. At that point, it was just like, no, he's not going to the mirror, because I couldn't keep it together that winter. And if I go to the mirror where no one's happy, you forget it.
Right.
It wasn't even a question. And B&G, forget it. So I went to Adelphia. It was a small place at the time. It was owned by David Corbin. It opened a small yeshiva there. Great guys, he had a great group of guys. And I went to check it out. And when I was there, I happened to find out, I met another friend of mine. And he said, this fellow of Naftali Stern, who's actually part of Adelphia, not part of Corbin's, but in the same base medrash. And he's giving a daily shir, and we love it. We have a group of 10 guys, post Eretz Yisrael, and we're a great group. And we're kind of part of that other Corbin's group. It's not like Adelphia, which was considered less yeshivas, and then the Corbin's guys were more yeshivas. He said, we're kind of in between, and it's a great group of guys, and guys are serious and they're learning. I was like, sign me up. Like, this is what I want. I need a rebbi. I need a shir. I can't just jump in. I'm not ready for that. I need a real shir. I need a shir. So, and I remember I went into Rabbi Shane, who's the Yeshiva of Adelphia, and he was like, okay, it's a little complicated because Rabbi Corbin will think that you came to check him out and I'm stealing you. So you have to go and convince Rabbi Corbin that Rabbi Stern is for you. I said, okay, I could do that. I walk in and he says, he's like, so tell me, Shachris say that's Pashut by you? I'm like, no. He's like, what? It's not Pashut? I said, yeah, I mean, whatever. I had my ups and downs. And I mean, well, I can use the Kazakh sometimes, but I heard you have a small place. So what Kazakh me? So tell me, when is shear? Like, what time is shear every day? There's no shear. They have chabura once a week. He was from that type of yeshiva, and he's looking at me and he's like, oh, we don't have shear. And then by the time our conversation was over, he's like, okay, so listen, there's this other option I think will be very good for you.
Perfect.
Left Holy Stir. So great, that's exactly what I needed.
Meaty did that one really well, yeah.
And we actually were very good with Rabbi Corbin. We had a great chat with him, and we still keep up. Whenever he's to Israel, he comes, we eat shalshudas together. Whole chevra of guys in the neighborhood that we eat shalshudas together. He actually ate in my house a few times. But I joined the Raphael Snare, which was one of the greatest things that happened to me. He was just such a special yid, and I just wanted to see what real Ahavas HaTorah was, a real mentor. If you look at Raphael Snare, he was nifter quite a few years ago. But he was one of the better things that happened to me. And I also got very close to Rabbi Shein at the time. They really it was a good year. Also with its ups and downs. Baruch Hashem and Rabbi Ginsburg and Rabbi Shein, they both intervened. I was having a good time. I was happily single, and I was not interested in the shidduch. I was just like not going there yet. And they both intervened, and they said, "Listen, you're good. You're still moving up. You're still growing.
Okay.
Get into shidduchim before that stops." And I was terrified. I was terrified to go to shidduchim. I tend to like people, and I was terrified to start dating people because I knew that everyone I meet I'm gonna like.
Right.
I used to daven. I'm like, Hashem, just send the right one right away. Not because I need to get married, because I don't want to choose the wrong one.
Right. Wow.
So Baruch Hashem, I had a big zchus that Hashem sent me, not just the right one right away, but one of the most amazing thing I could have asked for, which is my wife of 18 years now. And she has been the best partner I could have asked for, to be by my side, through all the challenges that happened after that as well. Kept trying to grow. I got married and moved back there to Israel. I went to yeshiva called Yagdil. At the time, now it's a big, kind of brisker type of yeshiva. At the time, it wasn't. It was more Nashim Nazikin, Mir type of guys. Right after I left, that's when it exploded. They decided to switch over to Kudshim, which is the type of, I don't know how to explain this to
other area of study, yeah.
A different higher level study. Not a real higher, whatever you want to call it. Anyway, so they attracted a different higher level type of boy after I left. But when I was there, I was married, I was learning there. It was also ups and downs, that same pattern. But the hardest thing I had was shear. So I was lucky that I managed to convince them that I shouldn't have to go to shear. I would learn with the covenants. Most of the time I was there, I didn't have to go to shear. I tried a few times. I really wanted to learn from the Rosh Yeshiva there at the time. Rabbi Yitzchak, my mind just went blank. Rabbi Yitzchak. It's going to come to me as soon as we hang up. And he can't see. He's just a blind, and from a big lamdan. I wanted to learn from him. I remember going to Shech. I wanted to make it work, and I just couldn't. I just could not pay attention. Eventually, I kind of lost my motivation. I gained a lot there. I had a phenomenal guy. We used to learn second Seder with Muksa, which was not what the yeshiva was learning, but we decided to do it. It was amazing for me. It did peter out eventually, but I gained so much from that, like just opening my mind to halacha and learning something else, and just seeing that how much I could get into it. And I gained a lot. At one point, once things petered out and I wasn't really getting it together, I kind of lost motivation there. a rebbi of mine, Rabbi Feivelson, actually mentioned he suggests one, go to the mirror. I think the mirror will stand up, help you, take it to the next level. And at the time, the mirror to me was this scary, big, huge place for really stark guys. And I it's funny now. I look back, like they're all younger than me, and not necessarily more stark than me, but in my mind, it was like this place that was way above you. But he told me strong, go check it out. So I took a guy and I said, let's go learn in the mirror. End of winter, end of the semester, we decided to take a day and go in there and check out some of the shiurim and check it out. We sat down to learn, and this was towards the end, so things were petering out over there, with the energy level was still so high in the base marriage. And I sat down to learn. And I think it was the first time I ever sat and learned for 4 hours straight. Like, we took this sugya, whatever they were learning then, and we just jumped into it, and I just didn't stop. And I stood up after 4 hours. I was like, that never happened before. I usually need to get out, take a break. And it was an eye opener. I'm like, I could do this. I'm on the level. I'm higher than a lot of these guys. Now I went to the shiur, and some of them were a little. I found the one that was good for me. It was Rabbi Wagshaw. Yehuda Wagshaw. His shiur was just, he had the perfect shiur for me. Looking back, it was because he has an incredibly clear hasbara, and he also repeats himself, so I was able to take notes. And one thing I found since then is that notes is key for me to pay attention. Problem is that I kind of get lost when I'm taking notes. So I mean, I'll take notes and I'll fall behind because I'm too busy taking the notes, and then I lose the shiur and I'm gone. But Rabbi Wagshaw, I was able to keep up. So I was able to take the notes and I was able to follow, and I took, he picked me up to the next level, and I took him on as a rebbi right away. I realized I need a rebbi here. And I got the seat next to him. I mean, the second man there, I was already sitting right next to him in the base medrash. And I drove him crazy till he gave me a chavrusa shaft, and I used to learn with him once a week. And we grew close. I even brought my wife to Shabbos lunch by him 1 week, and we grew very close. And he really built me. And again, we saw the same patterns. I saw the ups and downs, but my ups were way higher. I was growing. I was seeing new horizons. But then again, the lows would come, and they were sometimes even lower, because I was just so, it was, I had such high expectations for myself, and then I would just lose it and lose all motivation and just go to such a low place. So those ups and downs were pretty extreme. There were times I was learning 12 hours a day, full days, just acing it, and then just being like the guy I dreamed to be, and then suddenly, out of left field would come whatever the test of the day was, and I would just tank and trying to pull it together and not. And I distinctly remembered like sitting there in Seder, like not being able to concentrate, I couldn't beat a line, I couldn't keep up with my chalusa, and not knowing why, what changed, what happened. Sometimes it was like I'll blame it on something that was going on at the time, and then often I would have nothing to blame it on. Like, I'm clean, I'm good, I'm not doing anything that should be distracting me too much. Why can't I pull this together? And so at some point I started realizing that, okay, so it's not all those other reasons I thought until now were pulling me down. There's something going on. And I remember talking to Rabbi Wagshaw, and he couldn't figure it out either. We couldn't figure it out. Like, what's the deal with these ups and downs? At some point, my rebbi called me up, this Rabbi Feivelson. It was about 2 years into the mirror, and he told me he was opening the yeshiva. And he had a great group of guys, very small group, but good group. And he said, I'm just letting you know, so I'm not trying to steal you from anyone or take you out of anything, but if you're interested. And I said, I am interested, but I'm also very happy in the mirror. And I was very happy there. But, I had these ups and downs, but as I said, my ups were up. And but he said he was learning the same thing. He was going to learn the same thing as the mirror that first year that he opened. So I said, you know what, I'll come to you, say in the afternoon. I'll learn with you in the afternoon. That doesn't make a difference where I am, especially if you're learning the same masakta. But I would like to stay with Rabbi Wagshaw in the morning. And so I did that for Elul, that first short Elul. And then in the winter, I hit a good down. So Elul was amazing. I was in the morning in the mirror and the afternoon by him, and it was just an amazing time. And then came the winter, and I took one of those deep dives and couldn't pull it together and didn't know couldn't figure it out. And at that point, I was in the afternoon by Rabbi Feivelson, and he was giving me a lot of chizuk, and I spoke to Rabbi Waxel for a while, and we decided, it'd probably be better for me to be over there in a small place where I can shine. And I went there, and so I've been there for 15 years. It was a solid success.
Probably a good move, yeah.
But not without its ups and downs. It was constant ups and downs. Now, at one point, I went to speak to someone who told me that I may have ADHD. We're going back about probably 13, 14 years ago. So it became, I remember I bought a book even about adult ADHD, but I never really connected to it. And I was like, I knew Ritalin didn't work for me, and nothing really came of that. And then, okay, so whatever. So before that, Baruch Hashem, I kept growing, I kept pushing, I never gave up. And I said, I don't care, I could learn, I can't learn, I could keep it up, I could sustain this. I never stopped pushing.
I guess what did the yeshiva do right for you? What was
what was great? It was a small place. I had my place. I had my rebbi. I was part of something. Not to say that in the mirror I wasn't. I did mirror every yeshiva that I was in. Pretty much was the best thing that happened to me. But once I got to over Feivelson, it was just it was something special. I was part of something. I had a rebbi that I was close to, and I had my place, and I just kept going. I kept growing and falling, but I kept ultimately growing. And at some point, I was very good. I was very good with the younger boy, with the Bakram. I was very close to them. They all used to eat by me, and I used to learn with them. And I think I was a pretty good influence on a lot of guys. And at some point, he asked me to start giving Vadim, Musar Vadim, classes. And to the boys, more in outlook, Jewish outlook. And at first I thought he was crazy. Me, I can't give these things. Like, mashgiach shouldn't give those things. And he's like, because he'll be like, kind of like the mashgiach. I'm like, I knew who my mashgiachim were, and then I'm not that. I remember him telling me, he's like, first of all, you have no idea what they were. Like, I knew who they were. They were not me. And he's like, you looked up to them because they were your mashgiach, but you don't know what they were. You're pretty good yourself.
Amazing you have that conversation with him. Like, have that open conversation with him. It's the kind of thing that you think would be able to articulate it to somebody and they respond is like very powerful.
So, Baruch Hashem, I'm very fortunate to have a rebbi I was very close to, and for the most part able to be open. There is a side of me, maybe has something to do with ADHD, that has a very hard time opening up to Rabbeim. Okay. Something, especially when I feel very vulnerable. He was very good that he didn't make me feel so vulnerable. So, but when I do feel vulnerable, that's been some work in learning how to open up. But yes, Baruch Hashem, I had a rebbi that I was able to be open with, and he pushed me to start giving those classes, which I did. I was really self-conscious. I did not think impostor syndrome was a term I recently learned, which I'm still on the fence of how much was it imposter, how much of it is fear of failure, but or low self-esteem. But it's a great word. It's a great word, and it was the first time someone said it to me. I was telling him how I don't feel like a mashgiach, and I feel like I'm tricking people. And he said, "So you feel like you're an imposter?" I'm like, "Yeah, exactly." He's like, "You ever heard of imposter syndrome?" I said, "No, but that's great." But it was very liberating because I learned to allow myself to not feel like an imposter. Like, I might not be on the level of other mashgiachim, but I'm still a mashgiach, and I can still have a good influence on guys. And just because I'm not Adar doesn't mean that I can't be me. And I've embraced the role a lot more since I probably that was a big turning point. Realizing that it's just the imposter syndrome. You're right. I may be a bit of an imposter. It's fine. I'm not really tricking anyone. I'm just not being someone else. I'm just being me, and that's okay. So I did feel like a real imposter, and I did not feel like I was. For a long time, I would tell everybody, I'm not the mashgiach. I just give adam. I just give classes. I'm not in charge. I'm nobody. I'm not part of the staff. And for a long time, I did that. And most of it was because I couldn't see myself as someone who was ready to be a mashgiach. And I can't say I see myself so much now either, but I've accepted that a lot more.
So bring it over to
over to ADHD diagnosis. So it's been a couple of years. I was giving these vadim. I was becoming more and more of a mashgiach role and working with guys a lot more. But at some point, I started feeling really stuck. Those downs were getting to me. I still had ups and downs, and the downs were getting to me. And I feel like I couldn't move forward. And I had different things that I don't have to talk about everything, but I had certain things I just couldn't seem to get past. And I remember I went over to a rebbi right before Rosh Hashanah last year, and I said, Rebbe, I think I should go speak to someone. We're always sending all the bachurim to. I'm stuck. I need to speak to someone. I need to open, get down these things that something's blocking me. And he asked me what. He's like, he didn't see so much of, he didn't think he saw anything that was pressing. And I explained to him what I thought. He said, okay, I hear you. Maybe you should go speak to someone. We had someone that we used to send a lot of guys to that we're very happy with. And he's like, I'll go ask him if he would speak to you. But mashgiach, I'm almost the guy's age, but maybe, if he thinks it will be helpful. And he said, yeah, let him come there, but let's talk and see if, we can figure out what's blocking. And we sat down, we started talking, and then I think it was the first session I sat down to talk to him. He says to me, have you ever been diagnosed with ADHD? I'm like, not really. Like 12 years ago, someone mentioned it, and 20 years ago, I went to someone, and he told me to take Ritalin, and it didn't work. Actually, I don't think I'm really ADHD. He's like, I think we should maybe consider going for an evaluation because you check off every box. And I'm like, really? He's like, yeah, impulsivity and the lack of focus, and he started going through the whole list of time management and organization and everything. And he's like, you check it all off. I think you should go for an evaluation, which I did. And lo and behold, I checked off every box. I was unanimously ADHD and quite inattentive. So the fellow I went for the evaluation to, he suggested I try Ritalin again. To try, hey, maybe things have changed in the past 20 years. And I took a small little dose, stolen from my son, who's one of them who's ADHD, and it was the same thing I remember. I took a small little dose, a little 5 meg, the smallest you can get, and I felt like I had just been shot into outer space and got stuck on some other orbit. And I was like, but I thought, I'm going to try one more day. And it was awful. And I called him back. I'm like, is there anything else we can try? He's like, no, forget it. If that's what's happening to you, stimulants are not your thing. Let's try a few other things. He told me to try Strattera. I gave it a month. It was awful. Also, for a different reason. This is some terrible side effects. And then, Wellbutrin helped me a bit. That was nice. It did help, like my overall mood, and that was good. Turns out if you're inattentive and Ritalin is not working for you, maybe try Wellbutrin. Mention it to your doctor if he doesn't mention it first. But that was helpful. But the biggest thing that came out of that was ADHD. Like that was the explanation, and I started looking into it. And I said, what is ADHD? I thought I knew what it was. I even had a kid with clearly ADHD, but I didn't. It turns out I really didn't. And I started listening and reading anything I could, and it was eye-opening. One of the biggest eye-opening things I heard was a podcast given by David Becker. where he was speaking to the community. I think it was the Coach Menachem podcast, if I remember correctly. And he gave this whole explanation of ADHD, and I was just blown. I was like, wow, there were so many answers in that podcast. And he was talking to the frum audience, like it really started hitting home. This is what's been going on. This is why I can't concentrate. There's so many answers here to my ups and downs and to my difficulties. And then in the middle of that podcast, he says, can I make an appeal? And Coach Menachem says, yeah, sure. Or whoever was on the other end. And he says, we need coaches, ADHD coaches. There are not enough from ADHD coaches out there. And this is something that we really need to help people with ADHD learn to cope. Therapy is not always the answer. Medication doesn't do the whole job. It's sometimes, like in my case, none of the job. And we need coaches, and we need people who get the community, and we need more of you. And so if anyone's looking to go into anything, consider this. Consider ADHD coaching. And I was like, you know what? That sounds like a really good idea. On one hand, I'm a mashgiach. I'm working with boys. I could really learn to get more skills in talking to boys. Just the coaching aspect of learning how to ask questions and how to talk and work with boys would be very helpful. And then learning about ADHD is something I really need to do clearly. And if I could help other people who are going through what I'm going through, if I can find something to do, I have a full-time job. If I can find something, to do on the side, and maybe even bring in something that I can help people who are going through what I'm going through, or have gone through, is that would be like the perfect fit. And I remember I went over to my Yeshiva. I asked him what he thought, and he was like, enroll.
Hello.
And I contacted David Becker, and I said, where do I start? Sign me up. I'm all over this. So he sent me this place he said, check out this place called Atka. There might be some other places. Terrible thing to tell a guy with ADHD. Don't tell him to check out anything else. Just tell him where to go, because I went into this rabbit hole for a month and a half trying to find out about every ADHD coaching academy. And it turned into every coaching academy. Maybe I could just do coaching, and then I could do ADHD education on the side and tie it all together. And I went into this rabbit hole, and there's not, even the ADHD coaching academies do not build their websites for people with ADHD. I don't know why, but they are the most complicated things to figure out. And I was going in circles trying to figure out which place would be the right place for me. I ended up going full circle. Ended up right back where the place that he told me to go to was ADCA. Great program. I also joined another program called Mentor Coach. There's two academies that are under this credentialing agency called PAC. They credential two places, Mentor Coach and ACTA. ACTA stands for the ADD Academy, which is like the most strange thing to call your place, but yeah. But they're really good. Both places were really good. I did some great training. So I joined. I enrolled. So we're going back last spring. I started my training. Finished in March. It was incredible. I mean, it was so empowering and so liberating. Learning about myself, which was a lot of what I did throughout the courses is get coached. So I learned a tremendous amount about myself and about my ADHD, and then my skills and I was it really did up my game in talking and working with and being there for my students was impacted tremendously. It's very hard to do proper coaching as a mashgiach. It's like a boss trying to coach his employees. It doesn't really work when you're the boss and you want the guy to open up to you and tell you what's holding him back. It's not going to work very well if you're the guy paying his bill. So, as a mashgiach, telling your guy to always open up doesn't always work. They do open up to me, but you need a certain type of relationship when you can't really take your students and be their therapist. It could be challenging. Same idea, but it's helped me tremendously because it definitely opened a lot of doors though in our conversations. I've learned how to take the conversation further and deeper, and that's been tremendously helpful. And then outside of my yeshiva, or being able to reach guys and coach them has been tremendously rewarding.
What were some of the skills that you learned for yourself and that you taught others? Some of the skills that like the practical ones.
Practical ones. So I touched on before, like the conceptual part. Learning, and everyone's different, but learning different ways that we process information is so important for yeshiva guys. Everyone processes differently, and putting your finger on the different ways you process. We all process many different ways. It depends. If you're learning with Caruso, you're sitting in chair, you're going to be processing information differently. Like for me, I mentioned, I need to take notes in order to follow a shir. I cannot follow a lecture unless I'm taking notes. It just doesn't. I can't sustain the focus. But as the second I'm writing, I'm fine. The problem is I get lost sometimes. This came out during, I think I even mentioned this to you before, that this came out during the course. I was talking to a fellow student, and I got this idea to, instead of trying to take notes, and I'm constantly, my problem is that I start taking notes and I can't write fast enough, and I get lost because I'm still catching up and writing. And I've tried different things. I tried, not writing as much. It just never really worked until I saw this idea. Take an unlined piece of paper and just start scribbling. And all the words that are coming at you that you want to write down, just write them. Just don't look at what you're writing. And let it just scribble all over the page. And it takes the pressure off of getting it right, getting the right words, getting the right place, putting it in the right place. You're just taking it as it comes. And if what I'm trying to do is to stay in the focus, forget the notes for afterwards. I anyway barely ever read my notes afterwards because they usually weren't too good because I was getting lost in the middle. So just forget the notes. Just use it as the tool to keep the focus. And it was a game changer. I walked into the next year. I took a piece of paper from the copy machine, and I sat down, and I went with the Yeshiva all the way till the end of Shir. All of a sudden, I'm like, I guess I got everything, but I was able to focus all the way to the end, which is something that in the commercial I haven't been able to do for years. Once that lesson it became progressively harder. And interesting enough, as time went on, it got harder and harder for me to follow a share. I don't know why. I just noticed now. We started learning Ksulas. I opened up my Ksulas. I found notes from the last time I learned it. And I was like, first of all, did I learn that much? Wow. I had quite a bit of notes I don't remember taking. Which by the way, it's another big piece of ADHD. We don't remember our successes, and if you could find a way to write that down and remember when you learn well, because there was so much in my Gemara that I could not believe. I literally do not remember learning, and but it was very encouraging for me to see how much I had actually accomplished, which I didn't remember the last time around. So, it turns out I'm better than I thought I was. So that's just a little thing. But anyway, so as far as the notes are concerned, this was a big piece for me because I knew that I need the movement and it could be, I don't know if it's a verbal or I'll call it writing processing of helping me to stay in focus and understand the shir, but at the same time, it was the writing was slowing me down. So I found this perfect balance. Everyone's got their things like that they got to figure out. Some guys, I was talking to one fellow about this. I said, go over to your Maggid Shir before Shir. Ask him what he's giving Shir on and what each thing said. What does Taisa say? What does the Rambam say? What does the what does the Rajba say? Get just a one-line outline on every. It was a game changer because all of a sudden he had a picture of and in coaching usually we get the other guy to tell him, but I was the mashgiach. I was allowed to tell him what to do. But it's something huge that comes out in coaching is you figure out what your processing modalities are, and then figure out strategies and how to use that knowledge to start processing better and start learning better. And if you're a conceptual thinker, then knowing the picture of the what are the Rishonim saying, And now I know exactly what I'm looking for. So when I open the Rajva, and I'm not just trying to figure out what he's saying, I'm trying to see how does he say that. And for some people, that's huge. That drives them. They're already halfway there. And I know it works for me, and then passing that on to other guys and starting to recognize that. And then, as we, there's so many different ways to learn. The guy starts realizing that he needs to stand up, he needs to talk when he's learning, or he needs to not talk when he's learning. So notice that. Notice how you process and how you remember things, and how do you try to, when you're really trying to, you decide you want to get this, I want to pass this, whatever it is, and pass this, go to mark on this test. What did you do to really retain the information? And notice that. And then when you notice that you did certain things that you don't always do. Well, those are keys right there. Those are keys to how your brain processes. And use that. Start finding strategies how you can use that in your everyday. And these could just open up huge horizons. So that's, I guess, as for things you could find, learn how you learn.
Right.
Start paying attention to that.
Right. Wow.
If I could go back and if they had invented ADHD coaches when I was in high school or this madrash,
right,
and I could go to one, that would have been amazing.
Right. As we start to wrap it up, do you ever hear people say ADHD is quote unquote not real? If you ever hear that, what do you say? What do you want to say?
Not so much anymore. It's sometimes, you get the occasional guy who asks, in my days they said, he just had ants in his pants. But I think for the most part, there's a lot more knowledge, and people just have seen the effects of Ritalin. And at least as a Rebbe, you really see how much it does for a boy. And I'll put it out there for anyone who's on the fence about taking Ritalin. Besides that, it's super safe. And as a parent, as a Rebbe, having seen the way it builds people's confidence and self-esteem, I'm not here to push anyone to take medication. And if you're coming to me as a client, I will never tell you that you should take medication. That's up to you. But as somebody who's, as an educator who's been out there and seen the effects of the self-esteem and how it builds people, please consider allowing your son or daughter to take medication if it will help them, because they have challenges that you may not have had, but it's really hard for them, and they have to work really hard, and they're still not going to be able to. And if they would be able to take away that challenge and believe in themselves, the success breeds success, and it brings a tremendous amount of confidence and self-esteem. And you can literally change the trajectory of your kids' lives by giving them that opportunity for success. So please, consider the cost versus the benefit. And I'm not a big fan of necessarily medicating people for no reason, but this could be a really good reason. So ADHD is real. There are people who have challenges, and medication is really helpful. I had to just get a message out there. Not as a doctor. I am not a doctor, and I'm not coming as a doctor. I'm just coming as someone who's seen it help a lot of people.
Okay, as we wrap it up, is there a message of hope you'd like to leave our listeners with?
Yes. I think you all should hope. No, my message of hope is that...
That was in your capacity as dad?
Yeah. What should you hope for? I think everybody has tremendous... I'm not going to use the word potential, because that is the word I'm most allergic to growing up. But we all have tremendous amount of strengths that we not necessarily are aware of, but we have them. And you may have challenges, but you have strengths. You have your strengths that can overcome your challenges. And the trick is to find those strengths. But we all have the wherewithal to be great people. Every single one of us was put in this world for a reason, and you were given the strengths that you need to overcome your obstacles. And never stop looking for those strengths, because you have them. And when you find them, there's no end to what you can become. Never. I don't care how old you are. I don't care how bad your ADHD is or whatever other condition you may have. You have strengths, and you can be amazing. Almost as amazing as Rabbi Reich.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Anything else you want to say today?
And if you're around somebody who's struggling, just be there for them, encourage them, and the biggest thing you can do for anybody is we're not here to deal with people. I one time heard Dr. Russell, or is it Shimon Russell? Is he a doctor? I'm not sure, but he's Shimon Russell. One time I was schmoozing with him. I was friends with his son, and he told me that he said, "You don't deal with people. We be with people," and it's something I'll never forget because I think it's one of the most amazing messages. So besides that, don't give up on yourself. If you're with anybody who can use some encouragement, you're not there to deal with them. You're there to be with them, and they're amazing. You're amazing, and let's all try to find the amazingness of each other, and just keep hoping.
Okay, perfect. All right, Rabbi Yehuda Grunhut, thank you so much for joining us today. It's an amazing story. Thank you.
Okay, my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you again for listening to this episode of the ADHD Heroes podcast. For questions about the podcast, you can email us at adhdheroespodcast@gmail.com. Also, for sponsorships or to share your story, your ADHD story, you can also email us at the same place, adhdheroespodcast@gmail.com. To be in touch with me about ADHD coaching, writing, or speaking engagements, you can email me at rsreichadhdcoach@gmail.com. Be sure to check out my website, rsreich.com, adhdcoach.com. You can follow me on LinkedIn, or you can check out my blog on nefesh.org. Check out my blog there under my name. Important disclaimer, podcasts are great, but they do not take the place of mental health help or medical help. So if you need help with mental health or need a doctor, be sure to be in contact with some of them. Please, if you like this show, please rate, review, and share with a friend. That's how these things get out there. Thank you again for listening, and thank you to our producers at Pretty Easy Podcasts.